Good morning, Council. I'm Ahmad Payne with Public Works. This morning, we'd like to go over a report on the conservation future. It's been a tremendous tool for our community and ability to purchase and maintain a lot of sensitive areas that are beneficial community-wide. So today we want to let you know that what the program has been able to do, areas that we've acquired, and how we've been leveraging the dollars that we get from conservation area and to acquire a number of areas. So today on our team, we have Patrick Lee, who's been managing this program, and also Galena, that they're going to lead the conversation and the presentation. And feel free to have interrupt anytime you have any questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick Lee and the presentation.
So I'm coming through. Very good, thank you. This is Patrick Lee, Parks and Lands Division of Public Works. And today we wish to talk about the Conservation Futures Fund and Legacy Lands Program, update council on the status of the Conservation Futures Bond measures, and overview of the 2020 update to the Conservation Areas Acquisition Plan. Do I have the controlled advanced slides? Okay, I do. Very good. Thank you. Or, excuse me.
I think
there we go.
We have control over the slides, so if you can just let staff know when you're ready to move on, that would be great.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you, Rebecca, or Kathleen. I'm not sure who that was speaking. The program was instituted in 1985 as the Conservation Futures Program, and it was renamed Legacy Lands in 2006. Revenue is generated by a property tax levy. The maximum levy rate by statute is 6.25 cents per 1,000 valuation. The program has been very successful over its history, helping to acquire over 5,000 acres of land and leveraging county revenues by a greater than 1-to-1 ratio. Acquisitions have helped to assemble many of the well-known parks and natural areas in the county. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Including those listed here. Funds are distributed throughout the county, and acquisitions have been made along all major creeks and lakes. As the county's population has grown, public use of legacy lands has also increased significantly. Many habitat restoration projects have been carried out on legacy lands, and the long-term investments made by the county and partners are proving to be extremely valuable to support salmon recovery and water quality improvement efforts. Next slide. The Conservation Futures Fund was instituted at the start of the program as a dedicated fund to account for revenues expenditures for the program. Average annual levy collection over the last 5 years is $2.38 million. Up to 25% of the prior year's levy revenue is used for operation of the program and maintenance of properties. 75% of prior year's levy must be dedicated to conservation land acquisitions. In 2017, Council approved a list of 10 priority acquisition projects and authorized the sale of bonds to finance them. $7 million in bonds were sold in 2018 to be repaid over a 20-year period. Beginning fund balance entering 2020 is $11.79 million and includes bond sale proceeds. Anticipated 2020 levy collection is $2.6 million. First priority for use of revenues is debt service. Second is operations and maintenance. Third is the bond project list with other acquisitions undertaken as resources allow. Next slide. Planning documents that have guided Legacy Lands investments include the Clark County Open Space Commission report, the 2004 Conservation Areas Acquisition Plan, and the 2014 update of the plan. The 2020 update of the Conservation Areas Acquisition Plan will be an important guide as we move forward over the next several years. Next slide. The State Recreation and Conservation Office, RCO for short, is a primary source of state grant funds and federal pass-through funds. They require project sponsors to update planning documents every 6 years to maintain grant eligibility. The update provides the opportunity to engage conservation partners at the front end of a 6-year planning cycle. A list of short-term project opportunities will help staff to prioritize work activities, and a list of short-term county and partnership opportunities will be used to program use of the Conservation Futures Fund. Next slide. RCO requires the plan to address the following elements: conservation goals and objectives, an inventory of the important conservation resources, a review of the public involvement process used to develop the plan, a conservation recreation demand analysis, a 6-year capital improvement program, and certification that the plan was adopted by the governing body. Next slide. The plan provides a countywide planning context for conservation action. It is an important document to have in place when approaching private and public parties regarding conservation project funding. The technical work and mapping products may be used by county, partners, and other entities independently or jointly to identify conservation and recreation priorities. The list of funding sources in Appendix D facilitates development of a funding strategy through which the county and/or other entities may complete conservation projects. Next slide. Current program priorities include completing the Conservation Futures bond projects. We would like to reallocate bond revenues to new projects, as 2 projects have been withdrawn because landowners did not wish to move forward at this time. We wish to include a new list of potential projects in the plan to guide acquisitions over the next several years. Next slide. The 2 withdrawn projects are the Washougal Greenway connection between Hathaway and Schmidt Family Park and the Rock Creek Forest. Together, these total $1,360,000 that could be allocated to new projects. As shown on the table, the Lacamas Lake North project has 135 acres purchased by the City of Camas. Purchase and sale agreements for 50 acres of the Mason Creek project are approved by council. La Center Bowling Creek, Yacold Burn, and East Fork Lewis Optimus are scheduled for completion by 2/28/22. We are looking at a possible 65-acre expansion of the Lewis River Ranch project. A new appraisal is underway for the expanded footprint. We hope to have a purchase and sale agreement before council later this year. The recent public release of the Lewis and Clark Trail Plan shows that some acquisitions along Lake River could benefit trail alignment alternatives between Vancouver Lake and the Lewis River. Screening of farm preservation projects continues, and in 2019, the City of Vancouver completed an acquisition of 45-acre Fenton property near 4th Plain Boulevard and 5th Plain Creek. Next slide, please. The draft 2020 update to the Conservation Areas Acquisition Plan identifies 20 potential projects. This table shows a subset of the project list. These are projects whose scope is better defined at this point in time than some of the others. If council wishes us to move forward, these are the projects we could likely move on most quickly. The Camp Curry Lacamas Heritage Trail would connect some of the City of Camas's Lacamas Lake North acquisitions with a trailhead in the city, a trail through Camp Curry, and across Lacamas Creek to tie into the Lacamas Heritage Trail. A grant application to fund this project is pending before the State Recreation and Conservation Office. Council has been provided some potential alternatives for the Cedars Golf Course acquisition. It is also a candidate for grant applications, as well as use of clean water, stormwater source control funds. We purchased the 150-acre Flume Creek property in 2015 with the assistance of grant funds. However, we have not been able to negotiate a public access easement from the end of the public roadway across private property to provide vehicle access to the site. We'd like to explore fee acquisitions to address this access issue before this creates a grant compliance issue. In October 2019, Council sent a letter to the Department of Natural Resources requesting reconveyance of land to the county that is adjacent to the Hantwick Road to Molten Falls Trail Corridor and originally included in DNR's Michigan Trotter timber sale. Horseshoe Falls is a significant holding and staging areas for steelhead during their upstream migrations. It is also an important fish survey site for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Acquisition of private land on both sides of the falls would protect this important fishery resource. County owns all the land on the south bank of the East Fork Lewis River between La Center Road and Paradise Point State Park, except for portions of 2 private lots with river frontage. Purchasing the portions of the lots with river frontage would enable construction of a trail between La Center and Paradise Point. As mentioned, we are looking at an expanded footprint for the Lewis River Ranch acquisition. The original appraisal came in under the $2.3 million cost estimate, and we wish to explore whether the expansion would still fall within budget or if additional resources may be necessary. For many years, there's been a desire to make a regional trail connection between Whipple Creek Regional Park and Fairgrounds Community Park. This acquisition would provide that opportunity and sufficient land to provide a safe trail crossing of Northwest 11th Avenue. Next slide, please. The project opportunities lists are non-binding, but a list of projects, a schedule for completing them, cost estimates, and funding sources for completing projects are required RCO planning elements. The draft plan will be revised to reflect council priorities. Authorization from council will be sought at each key step in the project implementation process. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that council refer the draft conservation areas acquisition plan to the Parks Advisory Board for review. At council's discretion, a key component of the review would be for the Parks Advisory Board to review the full list of potential projects and prioritize short and longer term projects and develop recommendations for council consideration. We would then recommend that a work session be held to review Parks Advisory Board recommendations and provide staff additional direction prior to returning to council to consider adopting the plan. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Questions of the council?
Madam Chair.
Councilor Medley.
So thanks for that presentation. Great work. The bonds certainly came into being prior to me being on the council. And I'd just like a little bit more detail as to how that payment is occurring. I saw in your slide $2.6 million is about what we're getting through the real estate tax. So that's a revenue flow that should be fairly stable. But where are we at as far as the debt on the bonds, and how are we paying that off?
Well, the debt on the bonds is coming from proceeds of the Conservation Futures Levy. The levy, well, the bond interest rate, well, interest and principal on the bonds can be handled by our annual contribution coming in. So it is paid by the Conservation Futures proceeds that come in each year. So as mentioned earlier, that is why debt service is a priority for use of the funds. We want to be sure that we pay those off with Conservation Futures money, and that is the path that we're following at the present time.
Can I ask a follow-on question, Madam Chair? So how much of that 2.6 million is used to pay for the bond? Is it all being used to pay for the bond, or only a small portion of it?
I would say roughly about 50%, 45 to 50%.
So Pat, you said that 25% of the levy can be used for operations and maintenance. Does that cover it currently?
Yes, it is covering it currently.
And with any of these projects that you've mentioned, I presume that when you look at these various things, you take into account what the maintenance would be, and that those combined projects, whatever projects would go forward as prioritized both by the Parks Advisory Board and the council, that you would be able to maintain these properties with that 25%, correct?
Yes, yes. Up till about 2017, I believe, the limit was 15%. We initiated legislation together with Spokane County, to bump this up to a 25% level. So that has given us a little bit of a buffer to try and address new acquisitions that come online.
So when also, just to follow up on that, I see some of these things are for trails and to connect certain things. Does the construction of the trail, is that paid for by Conservation Futures, or what does that come out of if it's not Conservation Futures?
There could be small contributions from Conservation Futures, but largely it would have to come from grants and other sources to make those trail connections. And we always develop sort of a financial approach to trying to attract these things as we consider new acquisitions.
Do any of the monies, when you say other sources, come from the general fund?
I am not aware at the present time that they are coming from the general fund. I think our primary resource has been REIT funds for development of those trail linkages, and I believe as we are going through the update of the Parks Recreation Open Space Plan, that we would also be looking at how PIF fees might be allocated to some of these projects.
Okay, and then I had one other question. It was way back on one of the slides. I'm sorry, I don't remember what number it was, but it showed projects, and it showed, and I believe you were talking about two lots that are owned on the river, and the assessed value is 581,884, but I thought I heard you say it was appraised in the millions. Did I hear something right? Did I compute something wrong there?
No, I think no. I think that the appraisal is as indicated in that slide, which is I think it is slide 12. But the estimated value that we have, wouldn't be looking at purchasing the whole properties. We'd be looking at purchasing approximately 10 acres of the properties, and an estimate for that is about 150 to 200,000. Some of the property is encumbered by wetlands. I think the overall assessed valuation, which is not identified on that table, is about 600,000 for the properties. But we are just looking at a portion of those properties that are somewhat encumbered by some wetlands, and therefore we feel an allocation of 150 to 200,000 is a reasonable estimate for this stage of the process. Obviously, as we move forward to looking at the specifics, we would have to do appraisals and get fair market values of those easement areas or entire parcels, if that's what we're looking at. But that is the level we're looking at for this project.
What about the Whipple Creek Regional Park to the Fairgrounds Park Trail? I mean, is that, I see assessed value, often that's off for what the, fee appraisal would be, but I guess maybe I'm just confusing something. I thought I heard some numbers that didn't jibe with what I was seeing on the screen. So, and you don't have these listed in priority, they're just listed. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're listed. I just listed them in alphabetical order, actually.
Okay. Other questions of the council? I don't see any.
Madam Chair.
Okay, Council.
Pat, is there any opportunity for us to kind of give guidance to the Parks Advisory Board as they're looking at this? And I guess what I would like to ask for is for them to look at sort of our local needs analysis in terms of what areas have great trail access or trail connectivity or parks, and which areas are we lacking, and consider that as their, and they probably do anyway, but that would be the one thing I'd really like to hear is which of these are going to serve and provide amenities to areas that maybe aren't as rich as other areas of the county. So if that can be included in part of their analysis and brought back, that would be helpful.
Yes, yes, I think we, as a staff, we compile kind of a notebook with a lot of background information on properties, and it includes, you know, where there are potential trail linkages, where the populations are increasing. So yes, that is something that we would provide information for the Parks Advisory Board to consider.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments by the council? Okay, was this the sum total of this work session then?
Yes, just seeking council direction as to what the next steps should be. And
Yeah, I think the next steps would be to send this to Park Advisory Board and with the information that Councilor Blum just asked about, just so that they understand, and I'm sure they would. They're very much into this, so they probably do know, but I know they would need help from staff to sort of have that background information and understand some things. Also, I would hope that when the Parks Advisory Board looks at this, that they would consider maintenance and operation costs as we would move forward on these, or prioritize them, so that we're sure that as much of this can be taken care of, you know, through this Conservation Futures, the funding, as well as, you know, the possibility and availability of actually being able to build a trail, you know, the reasonableness of that happening, the cost, et cetera. So,
Madam Chair, could we move to the very last slide, just so we're all really clear about what the next steps are, about what staff's asking? I don't know if Rebecca's got control of the slides. Yeah, I just wanted, yeah, so this is, staff is asking for this path forward?
yes, that is what we are recommending to council.
Okay. Yeah.
and that's what I think I just said that we should do, is refer it to the Parks Advisory Board.
I'm just asking for the slide to be up so we could see clearly what the path forward is. So thanks, Pat.
Thank you, councilors.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, we'll see you on the other side at 10 a.m.
All right, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.